Hey folks, so this is your lesson at the beginning of section 8.3, probably the most important lesson that we're going to do all semester long. This is the lesson that leads up to our coordinates for the unit circle. I'm hoping that you will have the time and take the time to not only watch this video, but watch it multiple times if you need to. The first part of this lesson, I'd like to just simply talk about some special triangles. The first of the special triangles is the 30, 60, 90 triangle. And that's exactly what it sounds like. The 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, one of each in the triangle. I have a picture over here on the right that is the special triangle 30, 60, 90. One thing I'd like to point out about all triangles, not just this one, is that you can always look at the shortest side, and the shortest side will always be opposite the smallest angle. So this is the smallest angle. The median side will always be opposite the medium angle, and the largest side will always be opposite the largest angle. So if that's the case in this particular triangle, it's very easy to know then that this is my 30-degree angle because it's opposite the smallest side. This is my 60-degree angle because it's opposite my medium side. And then the hypotenuse is opposite the greatest angle, which is my 90-degree angle. A property of all 30, 60, 90 right triangles is that if you have a hypotenuse of 1, and I am going to stick with a hypotenuse of 1 simply because this is like my unit circle. If I have a hypotenuse of 1, then my short leg will always be half of that. Now, I think you can look at this and tell that on this triangle there is a short leg and there is a long leg. So the short leg will always be half of the hypotenuse. I could take the time to do the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing leg, but I will not take that time. You are Math 111 students, and I think you could do that on your own if you needed to. If you did do the Pythagorean theorem, you would find that the long leg is root 3 divided by 2. Root 3 divided by 2. So I have a fill in the blank here. If you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and if the hypotenuse is 1, like it's going to be on the unit circle, then the short leg is always going to be a 1/2, and the long leg is always going to be a root 3 over 2. Now, I can even put into practice some of the things that I learned from the last lesson, and that is I can use SOHCAHTOA to be able to answer the next 4 questions. So if I want the sine of 30, now I'm not just focusing on an angle that's called theta. Now I'm actually focusing on the angle that is my 30-degree angle. So the sine of 30 would be opposite divided by hypotenuse. SOHCAHTOA, opposite divided by hypotenuse. That's 1/2 divided by 1. And I don't need to simplify that. 1/2 divided by 1 is the same thing as 1/2. If you go to the one below that, cosine of 60, now you're focusing on a different angle. Now you're focusing on the 60-degree angle. And SOHCAHTOA tells you to look at adjacent over hypotenuse, which is still 1/2. The secant of 60, well, we know that secant and cosine are just reciprocals of each other. So if I just found that the cosine of 60 is 1/2, then I also know that the secant of 60 is the reciprocal of that, which is 2. The hardest of all 4 of these is to look at the tangent of 30. Remember that SOHCAHTOA says tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I need a little bit more room on this one. My opposite of my 30 now, focus on the 30. My opposite of 30 is 1/2. My adjacent is root 3 over 2. You cannot leave it like this. You must simplify your fractions. So we're going to use our rules for dividing fractions, and that's going to be 1/2 times the reciprocal, so multiply by your reciprocal, 2 divided by root 3. Fractions, multiply tops, multiply bottoms. I'm going to cancel the 2's. It makes it easier. That leaves me with a 1 divided root 3. Rationalize the denominator. You'll get root 3 over 3. So that one's a little bit more difficult than the other 3 were. That's the first kind of special triangle. The second special triangle is going to be the 45, 45, 90 triangle. So in this case, you can tell I've already marked the 90-degree angle. That leaves the other two angles to be 45 degrees. Now, if small is always opposite small, and medium side opposite medium angle, large opposite large, what happens when I have two angles that are exactly the same? Well, probably exactly what you think. The two sides that are opposite are always going to be the exact same length. So once again, let's make our hypotenuse equal to 1. And I could do some Pythagorean theorem work here again to be able to find my missing sides or my missing legs. I'm just going to hand you this information. The two legs will both equal root 2 over 2. Root 2 over 2. So if I have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and if my hypotenuse is equal to 1, like it's going to be on the unit circle, then both legs must equal root 2 over 2. I can take the time again to do just a couple of trig functions. Cosine of 45, it doesn't matter which 45-degree angle you look at. Both of them are going to be adjacent over hypotenuse, which is going to be root 2 over 2 over 1. I don't need to write the over 1. In order to get the cosecant of 45, you must think sine. So let's just think of the sine of 45. Sine of 45, if I'm focused on this angle 45, sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse, which will be root 2 over 2 over 1. Cosecant has to be the reciprocal of that, so that's going to be 2 divided by root 2. Rationalize the denominator. That'll give you 2 root 2 divided by 2. Simplify your fraction by doing some canceling, and you just have root 2. Lastly, tangent of 45. If you look at tangent, remember that's opposite over adjacent. Hey, they're exactly the same. So when you have a fraction that's the same on top and bottom, you're just going to get the number 1. So tangent of 45 will be 1. Now let's put this into practice by using our unit circle. Now I made a very large unit circle in the event that you want to print this out. And I want to review with you how to count around the circle. So let's first of all count around the circle. Let's go with spokes first. So this is counting by 30s if I'm in degrees and pi over 6s if I'm in radians. So let's start with degrees. We have 0 degrees, counting by spokes, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90, 120, 150. Counting by 30 here, folks. 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330, 360. If I go and do the exact same spokes, counting by pi over 6s, let me do this in a different color. My pi over 6s will be, start out with 0, 1 pi over 6. 2 pi over 6, we will reduce and write pi over 3. 3 pi over 6 will reduce and write as pi over 2. 4 pi over 6 will reduce to 2/3. 5 pi over 6 will not reduce. 6 pi over 6 will just be pi. 7 pi over 6 will not reduce. 8 pi over 6 will reduce to 4/3. 9 pi over 6 will reduce to 3/2. 10 pi over 6 will reduce to 5/3. 11 pi over 6 will not reduce. And lastly, 12 pi over 6 will reduce to 2 pi. So that takes care of the spokes. So we counted by 30s, we counted by pi over 6s. Now let's go back and let's count by 45s to get the middles. Still starting at 0, go to the middle of the first quadrant. That's going to be 45 degrees. Go to the top, another 45 is 90. Middle of the second quadrant is going to be 3 pi over 4. I'm sorry, I just switched over to radians on you. I apologize. I'm counting by 45s. I got distracted. 45, 90, and then 135. Another 45 puts you at 180. Another 45 puts you at 225. Another 45 puts you at 270. Another 45 puts you at 315. And then another 45 back to 360. Let's do the same thing in radians. Only this time we're counting by pi over 4s. Pi over 4s. So the first one is 1 pi over 4. Up at the top, 2 pi over 4. I've already got that one. Middle of the second quadrant, 3 pi over 4. Then 4 pi over 4. Middle of the third quadrant, 5 pi over 4. Down at the bottom, 6 pi over 4, I already have that one. It reduces to 3 pi over 2. 7 pi over 4 for the middle of the fourth quadrant, and then 8 pi over 4 being your 2 pi. So this just runs through a very quick remembrance, a reminder of getting your unit circle positions, just the angle measures both in degrees and radians. Now let's take a look at the coordinates. So I'm going to use a very light gray color. No, I'll use yellow. And I'm going to go with the spokes first. Let's go back to using the 30, 60, 90 triangle. Remember, if I want to make a right triangle, then I'm going to use my coordinate. Let's go with the 30-degree position first. Use my coordinate, drop down to the x-axis to make a right angle with the x-axis. And I have a right triangle that has a 30-degree angle at the origin. 30 degrees at the origin. I know that's not very readable, but I don't want to make too much of a mess by using darker colors. So 30-degree angle at the origin. Let's get a coordinate, an x and a y value. Remember 30, 60, 90 triangles? You have long legs and you have short legs. Notice, my x value is a long leg, so this is going to be root 3 over 2. My y value is a short leg. It will be 1/2. If I go back up and I make a triangle using the 60-degree angle, the 60-degree spoke. Once again, we start at that point. We drop down to the x-axis, making a right triangle. The angle at the origin is my 60-degree angle. So when I look at this one, my x-axis, my x value is now a short leg, so it's going to be 1/2. My y value is my long leg, root 3 over 2. Let's go to the next spoke. I'm going to skip over 90 degrees for right now. Let's go to the next spoke, which is at 120. So I'm at 120. Drop down to the x-axis. That's all I'm going to draw. Notice that the x piece of this is short, the y piece is long. So x piece is short, but it's going to the left, so this is going to be a negative 1/2. Y piece is long, but it's going up, root 3 over 2. I'm going to move quickly through the rest of the spokes. So the next one, at the 150, you have an x piece that is long. X piece that is long, and it's going to the left, so this is going to be a negative root 3 over 2. My y piece, this is a short, going up 1/2. Let's go to the next spoke. We're down to the third quadrant now. We want to go down to 210, so we have a long left, we have a down short. Long left, down short. So long left is going to be negative root 3 over 2. Down short, negative 1/2. The next spoke at 240, you have a short left, you have a down long. Short left, down long. Short left is going to be a negative 1/2. Down long, negative root 3 over 2. Let's go to the fourth quadrant. 300 spoke. You've got a short right and a down long. Short right, down long. Short right is going to be a 1/2. Down long will be a negative root 3 over 2. Last spoke, you have a long right, that's going to be root 3 over 2. You have a short down, that's going to be a negative 1/2. So that takes care of all of my 30, 60 positions. Now for the 45 positions. So remember, for the 45 positions, I'll go with a light gray. 45 positions, let's use that position to draw a triangle. Now I know this is getting a little bit messy. Let me get rid of some of these triangles in here. So here I have my 45, 45, 90 triangle. Remember that the legs are always going to be root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2 on the unit circle when the hypotenuse is 1. So this coordinate is going to be right root 2 over 2, up root 2 over 2. Right root 2 over 2, up root 2 over 2. Let's go to the middle of the second quadrant. You have to go left and you have to go up. Left and up the same distance. So we have for this coordinate, left root 2 over 2, so that's going to be negative. Up root 2 over 2 is going to be positive. Go down to the third quadrant. Left, down. Left root 2 over 2 is going to be negative. Down root 2 over 2 is also going to be negative. And then lastly, let's go over to the middle of the fourth quadrant. We're going to go right, down. So right root 2 over 2 is positive. Down root 2 over 2 is negative. This takes care of all of my 45, 45, 90 position. Only one more comment to make, and that's my 4 coordinates at the axes. So let's go to our starting position first at 0 degrees. We know that the unit circle has a radius of 1, so we know that this coordinate is 1, 0. The coordinate up at 90 degrees, 0, 1. The coordinate over at pi, or 180, negative 1, 0. And the coordinate down at the bottom is going to be 0, negative 1. I hope that this video was a help. Please feel free to view it multiple times if you need to. Have a good night.